Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest. My name is Jesper Doub. I'm Director for International News Partnerships at Meta. So my team runs the relationship, holds the relationship between media, especially journalistic outlets around the world, except for the US and Canada. So we spread our teams everywhere where we can to hopefully build a fruitful relationship. For everyone who's come today because you were expecting something fantastic new, because the program might be slightly misleading in the regard, I'm not going to talk about regulation. We're not going to talk about marketing, about what Meta has done fantastic things over the past years with the news industry, but we actually wanted to share something with you that we have observed over the past years. So we've been working very closely with the news industry across a lot of markets, across of all sizes, and we have supported the news industry in change to digital in all sorts of forms, as other platforms have as well. And then we have seen a trend that is more and more growing, which is smaller startups that are trying to find their new vision of journalism in the new ecosystem, and maybe find another way of doing journalism, which is different from what established media have tried so far. There are a lot of these initiatives. I see Ulrich from the Constructive Institute, which is one of the interesting streams that we're seeing develop over the world. There are others where you might see people who start off doing pretty funny things, like cat video style, and then all of a sudden turning into what you would consider serious journalism, either again or at that point. And we wanted to understand what the difference is. Why are legacy publishers, traditional publishers, and media companies struggling with finding their way to address younger audiences? I'm a proud Gen X, so I'm a grumpy old fart. But how do you address millennials? How do you address Gen Z? What is it that is different? The myth that Gen Z is not interested in journalism and news is wrong, simply wrong. The question is just, why are we as an industry, the media industry, failing in reaching these audiences successfully and growing these audiences again? So we actually planned this as a fireside chat. The setup is more like a hearing. So just imagine a fireside over here somewhere and us sitting in some comfy chairs instead of in front of a desk. But we hope that we'll get something to you and get you some inspiring information over the next 60 minutes. I have with me Alessandro, co-founder and CEO of Will Media in Italy, a startup that we are working with. I think it's fair to still call you a startup. You were founded in 2020.
Definitely so.
What I found interesting is the growth trajectory that Will Media has had. And when we talk with our traditional publishers in the Italian ecosystem, Will Media comes up as an example. You have other examples around the world. You have outlets like Zetland in Denmark who found a very good way of reinventing journalism and finding a way with their audience, very different from what Will Media does. You have someone like Brut in France who have really set a mark on the industry, where media companies in France try to do video à la Brut, which has become a trademark, which are now expanding globally. And there is no single pattern that we're seeing, but what I found interesting is just to understand how these people think and how it came about. So why don't we start, Alessandro, with just you maybe taking a couple of people through Will Media for 5 minutes, because you might not all be familiar with the brand and the offering so far.
Sure, and thank you again for the opportunity, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Alessandro. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Will. We started 2 years ago in January 2020, and we started from Instagram. That was not a choice in a sense. It was natural. It came natural to us to start from Instagram. We're a media company. What we do is that we share information on different platforms. Instagram is our biggest platform. We have 1.3 million followers. And then we have a good follower base, I'd say, on all the other platforms, from Facebook to YouTube and TikTok and all of that. They're growing. We're still learning all the languages because every place has a different language. 80% of our community is between 18 and 35 years old. We hardly talk to younger people, younger than 18 years old, but we talk a lot to, let's say, the remaining 20% is older than 35 years old. And we just share with them few posts a day, 2-3 posts a day. There's a great team doing it. We're 35 people right now, full-time employees. We have Francesco's the editor-in-chief and Luna, one of the authors. And what we talk about is just very few things. We don't do the breaking news. We don't chase to be the first in breaking the news. What we try to do is to give people the tools to understand what is going on in the world, the big changes and the macro trends that we can see pretty clearly. We do it through the language and use the language of the platforms that we live in. So we're not ashamed of using memes or short videos, reels, and we're experimenting with everything, even, and especially I would say with audio. We have published 8 or 9 podcasts. 9 podcasts. We go from the daily 5 minutes news that you need to not miss, let's say, and then we go to the 30 minutes long episodes where we share information about technology and regulation, or even social and ethical problems in a sense, or social values that we discuss with the community, and that's what we try to do on a daily basis. It's a struggle, but it's a fascinating one, and it's a great journey so far.
Thank you. I want to go back when you were, your past is not in media.
Nope.
No, not a journalist. You worked with Airbnb, you worked with Lime,
Yeah.
and then you decided to start a media startup. Why on earth?
Yeah, that was the question I received a lot, even from, and especially from the investors. I asked some money at the very beginning of this experience. I was a policy guy at Airbnb and Lime and all the other startups that I worked with. And actually, there was one moment in particular where I saw an opportunity, let's say. I was working at Airbnb, and we were running this beautiful project on how the platform could have saved small villages across Italy. We spent a lot of money. The idea was to convince people about the good effects of the platform. And then I went home, talked to my mom, and she had no clue I was doing it. I said, if my mom was supposed to know what I'm doing, at least because I'm her son, doesn't know what I'm doing, maybe I'm missing a lot of people. There's no chance for me to actually land all these topics and values that we were fighting for in the traditional media space at the time. And so what I saw was an opportunity to, let's say, avoid all the political aspects and news and debate that you see, that we see every day in the media. I said, let's focus on something else. And that's why we decided to do what we do, which is, as I mentioned before, talking about the changes going on, the values that are changing. And that was the first moment. And let's say that's somehow a professional need that I had. There was also a personal one. I grew up in a very, very small village close to the airport in Milan. And I was one of the very few who were actually interested in the news or in politics, even if I've never been active in politics. But I loved to read about politics in the papers. I still do. But all my friends didn't. But then they kept on coming to me asking for, some tools to understand what was going on in very pivotal moment, I'd say. And so I tried to combine those two things and say, well, if I manage to actually turn the lights and say why this is important, even to you, why you should actually care about this kind of topics, to people who are non-traditional readers, and then I can combine it with the social values changing and probably the commitment that even companies and brands are taking, probably there was a way to change or, I would say, increment the offer in the communication space.
When you talk with investors, just from what I know, if you have a brilliant idea to found a media company or a journalistic startup, you see a lot of doors closing immediately. You can easily pitch the 400th t-shirt e-commerce solution and find some money, but find money to really fund journalism is hard. Where do you find these people?
First of all, I regret I didn't use buzzwords like blockchain or stuff. Probably would have been much easier to raise the money. A lot of investors told us we don't do digital media, and I think it's more of a fashion to say so because of previous experiences, or it's a common sense, let's say, to say no. But those that actually wanted to invest at the end were people who looked at the side of the social impact, in a sense. They are investors who are tired of the polarization that they see in the media sometimes, or they actually felt the same need in something else to be displayed in the news, and so they shared the mission first rather than the business plan. Most of them didn't get to the slide with the financials, thank God, because they were wrong in the most cases. But yeah, they shared the mission, they shared what we wanted to try and create, and they didn't look at the bottom line or the top line. Now they're also happy investors, I'm happy to say.
What struck me when we sat together in preparation for the talk is your staff. The people on your team, what they are, where they come from. And one thing that might be concerning for people in this room is that there are only very few journalists on your team at the moment, which I found very surprising. Why is that?
Yeah, there are only 4, I would say, journalists, professional journalists, and in the team out of the 35 plus, 45 FTEs, so full-time employees, and then we have external consultants and collaborators. I would say it's somehow a choice and a result of things. We didn't plan to have such low level of journalists, but we don't look out for journalists. We don't search for journalists to join the team. We look for experts. We look at former activists or activists. We look at people who were former lobbyists, experts in their fields, people who were in the communication sides, maybe for brands or for NGOs. And we have very few journalists. It's not like we don't want them. It's just that the kind of in-depth knowledge that we look for, sometimes it's something that they didn't have the time to build in their journalistic path or career up until our roads crossed.
So being a journalist is not an exclusion criteria as long as you're an expert in your field?
I'd say sometimes what my very personal experience, what the journalists I've met, especially the young ones, let's say, in their path, they were asked to talk about or write about too many topics, and they didn't have the time or the chance to go in depth. Some of them did, of course, and most of them then joined the team, and some others didn't. We do give them the chance to go in depth. We look for experts. We look for people who, on a loose leash, let's say, they would talk about the same topic for hours and hours, because we just love that kind of knowledge.
I was a CEO in a media company before I joined Meta. And if you had brought your case to me, the idea to start on Instagram, of all platforms, not have a website, not necessarily hire educated journalists, and wanting to grow fast in a time where the pandemic was coming, I would probably say all your choices are wrong. Now here you are, being one of the startups that everyone talks about in the Italian market.
I'm not going to sleep well tonight after this, but yeah.
Just saying, it's very unusual to hear that story. When you look at the growth, what was it that made your growth explode in just 2 years? Like, the followership you have on these platforms is something that other media brands take years, maybe decades to build up. What is it? What is the secret sauce?
Well, I'm happy you brought this word. It's actually in our onboarding deck. There's the Kung Fu Panda father who says the secret ingredient for the secret ingredient soup is that there's no secret ingredient. So I can't tell you which is the secret ingredient, but I can tell you what we try to, or what we chase as the secret ingredient. First, we posted our first post on Instagram on January 2020. So a month and a half before Italy entered its first hard lockdown. And the growth was already very fast and solid and consistent. We got to 100,000 followers in 2 weeks or so, I guess. And then the lockdown came, and people were actually looking for information, for news. They were looking for some tools to understand what was going on, and they had plenty of time. And then they were using a lot of social media. So those three things, I don't want to sound too cynic, but those three things actually helped, in a sense, growth, or we were there for them. What I try to remind all the team on a daily basis is that we need to keep up with the promise that we made to the user, to the potential reader, which is we are not going to steal your time or waste your time. Every second that you give us is a gift for real. So what we how we apply that principle. We do it on the way we edit our videos, for example, the way we review our scripts. We go straight to the point. The editing is clear. There's no, blurry moments or stuff. We just go straight to the point, and we are always what we promise to be. So we are pre-competitive. We don't give the receipt. We don't give the solution to the problem. We are not in love with our solution. We are in love with the fact that that topic is important. And our objective is to have as many people as possible recognizing that that topic is important also for them. So that's all we want, and that's all we chase. And yeah, I think that's something that kept the growth solid. It's simple in a sense. It's just an incredible obsession with the product.
What is remarkable is that if you look at trust scores, both for your brand but also for a brand like Brut in France, that they are incredibly high. The audience is incredibly loyal. So the followers are not just people who accidentally clicked on something, but there is an active usage of the content. What is driving that? Is it the brand that you've built? Is it the faces that you put in front of people? What do you think contributes to such high trust scores that established media are struggling with keeping up with?
I think it's a sum of factors. First, we use our faces, and we use the most natural language that we could. So we force people to be natural, which sounds weird, but when you put a camera in front of people, then they start looking differently. They start talking differently. And we ask all members of our team to talk as they were talking to me, let's say, on a daily basis. And that is something very important because on Instagram, you don't see people faking things up when they talk to their community base. They're being natural. They're sharing what happens in their daily life, and that's exactly what we try to do. It's just somebody sharing their love with technology or finding solution for climate change and so on. So that is definitely something that helps. So language. The second one is faces. Again, we put people in the front line, and the fact that we never leave one direct message unreplied. We always reply to everyone, all the comments, and it's not just an emoticon waving our hands or something, but it's in a sense, it's part of the content. It's part of the caption of the post or the video. We just keep on discussing with the community. Or we screenshot the direct message that we have. We post it in our stories, and then it becomes part of our narrative. Or we say, we listen to you, and then here's the topic. On our daily podcast, for example, we have the Saturday the Saturday episodes is decided by the community. And in a sense, this is for good and bad. We had our problems. We had our tough days. We lost in a day 60,000 followers one day. It was kind of a rough day, let me tell you. The social media manager was stressed, strongly, very much so. But we had that moment because we were perceived part of the community, and so people felt, in a sense, that that trust was like undermined or in trouble, and so they wanted to, they needed clarification, and they came to us saying, what is going on? And some left because they were angrier, and we replied to everybody. And we got out of that rough days because we are a community. And a few days after, we grew 97,000 followers in a couple of days. So we were back and again growing. We now grow at the pace of 35,000 followers per month. Organically, sorry to say. Yeah, we do, and again, it's just that trust.
Talking about growth, what's the plan? Like, Italy is a very news-savvy market, generally, but what is the plan? Is it to conquer Italy and be Italy's #1 media outlet? Is it to grow internationally? Is it to just build a story and hope to be picked by someone? Like, what is the plan? What drives you guys?
It depends on which days you ask us. On the good ones, we plan to conquer the world, of course, and some others like, okay, let's get home safely tonight. I think coming from Airbnb, Lime, and all those companies, I've heard the word scalable a lot. And I hate when I hear people associating it with Will. I don't think it's scalable as a platform can be. We're not scalable at all. We can be recreated, replicated in other countries, definitely so. Will we do it? Maybe one day. We'll try to, definitely. I think it's a lot on the team. This is very basic advice. Those investors who actually trusted us told me it's all on the people. That you're going to choose the first 10 people you're going to hire will bring 10 new people and blah, blah, blah. And that's incredibly true, at least in my experience. So if we're going to do it, we will look for people at international level able to manage the complexity, let's say, and the sensitivity that we try to handle at a national level. But I think on the other side, that in the media space in Italy, there's a lot of things that we can do, and we experiment, and we can make wrong, of course, but we can learn from that. So in the near future, we'll stay here in Italy, and then we'll see.
Okay. When you look at your wider ecosystem, the traditional publishers are trying to reach the same audiences, have their own ideas. What's your relationship with them? Are they your competitors? Are they your enemies? Are they your big brothers? What's the relationship?
It depends where. In the social media sphere, you mean? I don't see them as competitors, to be honest. I think legacy media, traditional media publishers can be extremely good at their job in many forms. Most of them, though, are struggling, I think, on social media, and I understand that. It's complete change, and sometimes it's a matter of language, as I mentioned before. That's my point of view. If they're much bigger than us as companies, I don't see them as competitors, because business-wise, probably it's not that relevant the way we make money thanks to social media. And then we have a lot of small competitors. Every day there's something new trying to be similar or better than us. But it's a tough job to grow that much. I think what we try to do is talk to people who normally would not be looking for news proactively. We try to reach non-traditional news readers. That's our #1 target. Of course, we do have those that love newspapers, that read 5 newspapers a day, and then also follow Will. I think it's great. But our main objective is to reach people who don't and didn't in the past and don't. And I don't see a reason why they should be doing it in the future. If through Will they get in love with the news and then start buying a newspaper, I think it's a great objective that we reached, and I'd be happy that they do it.
And if you, as the CEO, sit with your team and talk about competition, if it's not the media in their traditional ways and how they interact on platforms that you also serve, who is your competitor? Like, what is your view on this? Who are you competing with?
Well, if you want to look smart in these cases, you have to say anyone, the attention war and stuff like that. I think the number one obstacle for our growth, which normally are competitors in a sense, it's ourselves and potential that we lose our reputation, that we lose our trust, and we break that promises. If we do so, then we have a huge problem, which is much, much bigger than competition, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of space. We're just at the very beginning of publishers of any kind on social media or podcasts or whatever. So I'm not scared by that kind of threat, let's say, as competition. I'm much scared about what we can do wrong or probably don't see, even in our relationship with platforms. I wonder how we can work better with Meta in the next 5 years or so. What's next? How we're gonna match your ideas, your strategy, and all of that. So I think that's something that I focus on more. If you want to share your 5-year strategy, please.
I'll do that in a second. If there isn't that kind of competition, is there cooperation and collaboration between people and other publishers who are trying to do the same, trying to find ways using platforms and their own and operated apps and presences? Is there collaboration between there? Is there exchange of ideas, or is it really like closed shop, everyone for themselves?
For what I can see, not much cooperation, to be honest. I'm happy to say that I'm actually proud to say that we saw that from the moment Will was launched, some other publishers started looking more at social media in a more serious way. Probably they had their strategies and their investments for social media channels in ready, but they didn't put it out, and probably it was a sparkle to do it. Will. There are some cases, not in the news per se industry, but I think at Frida, for example, in Italy and Spain and UK, they are a female focused publisher. They do great. They started 5-6 years ago, and probably the traditional news industry didn't look at them so closely as they're looking at Will, because it was a different topic. But now we're in a very, very close field, if not exactly the same. And so maybe we can be some sort of inspiration, let's say, but I can't see a proper collaboration, I would say, until now.
Listening to you, some would probably say that you're really walking a thin line between pragmatic activism and journalism, but you're still addressing an audience that is relevant for journalism, and successfully so. Do you feel that by primarily using the platforms as your way to reach people, you are restricted in what you can do and how you can tell your stories because of the formats, like a reel or a TikTok is just so long? And are you just catering to that? Or do you work the other way around and say, we want to bring the story across and are, I don't know, cutting it into pieces or building it into several channels? What's the way, and what do you say to the accusation that you could actually be more of an activist that's very smart in marketing yourself and hiding behind a media label?
Yeah. I'm not using the media label that much, to be honest. We are activists on the topic itself, but in, let's say, trying to put the topic in the agenda, which we think it's not there. So what we fight for is for the topic to be in the agenda. We don't see the demographic change and all the social value changes that are happening in the agenda quite as much. So we are active on that, but we are not active in giving people the solution or the receipt. That's not what we do. And I think that is something that our users, at least, they really like, because probably they were sick of the polarization that they saw outside and the speed outside in the media industry. Then they looked at social media for something different. But actually, that same polarization and speed was happening there. So we try to offer them a safe port and say, if you come over here, you will not find solution. We will not give you what to think, but we'll give you tools to think on solutions on your own. And so that's how we keep ourselves outside that kind of competition. And I think it's so far what has helped us in being perceived so trustable.
What do you know about your users? Like you said, these are people that normally did not, the majority of them did not consume news. How do you know that? And what does that make your product, how does that influence your product and the way that you build up your product?
We do so, well, we don't know much because platforms don't give us too many data at this stage, but we do so, we do know because also last year, for example, we traveled across Italy. We had 20 stops, and in every stop we met 50, 60 young people, well, people in general, with no discrimination, of course, of age or any kind. And there actually was this woman. She came with her daughter. We were in the south, so this girl was a student. She came home and for just 3 days, and the mom said, "Well, you're not gonna waste half of your day in an event. I'm coming with you." And so this woman participated in the debate that we had for 3 hours, and then when we asked her about what she thought, she just told us, "I stopped asking questions, and today I had that will again to ask questions about what is going on, even for her, pointing at her daughter." I think that's the kind of target that we have. Of course, not all of them are so far from the debate, from the public debate, but most of them are. And we know that from the kind of questions that we receive. The first podcast that we launched, we, of course, published a post on Instagram about our first podcast. I would say 70% of our comments was, "What's a podcast? How can I listen to a podcast?" And then we gave them all the links and information on how to do it, but they were not active users of Spotify or Apple Podcasts as their platform of choice for podcasts, which is, again, a significant indicator of the fact that they were not using it.
When you look across the platforms, that you said you started on Instagram, but obviously you're using all sorts of platforms, and you said that everyone has their own language. What are you seeing as the biggest potential working now? Like one of my favorite examples, if you look at TikTok and look at the German market, I live in Germany. One of the most successful media companies on TikTok in Germany is the 8 o'clock evening news from the public broadcaster. They do a terrific job in being on TikTok. It's amazing, really, really great. It's like, what is your view? Like, are you gonna leave IG? Are you gonna keep it as it is and then grow somewhere else? And what are your struggles, or what are your opportunities there?
We really like the audio part, so podcasts. It's something that we can try several things, and we go from, as I said, the 5 minutes format, which people like because it's short enough, and then we have 30 minutes format, and people say it's too short for them. They wanted something longer. So it's really a green field where we can test and try, and we're not testing enough, probably. So podcast is probably my number one temptation, in a sense. TikTok is a great platform. It's a little bit unpredictable at the moment, at least for us, but it's fascinating. I'm 37 years old, so TikTok language is not my native language, let's say, but I'm learning. And what we said as our red line, let's say, for TikTok, for example, is to not lose who we are just to match the platform. So we're not gonna do dance and stuff. TikTok, it's not about dancing anymore, or quite as much, but we're not going to do that. And we're developing dedicated formats for that. Instagram being so big for us, it's of course is like HQ, and then we try to inform people from Instagram that we have other opportunities.
You talked about the dialogue that you have with your users. Now, obviously, every platform has different opportunities to build out that community. How important is that when you look at the platforms where you go? It's like some have a very clear opportunity to be in touch with you, others are very much per post and engagement there. How do you look at that? Is that something you strategically choose, or is it more trial and error?
Let me go back to a question that you asked me before. It's about the strict rules and the formats that the platform kind of impose us. One of my questions to the team is always how he can hack that. I saw this group of creative guys that on Instagram, they took the carousel, they saw videos, and basically it was a novel, like a true crime or something like that. It was fantastic. They did nothing but use the carousel in a very smart way. So yes, there are boundaries, there are limits, there are ways the platform actually works, but we can, do things that actually can improve our creativity and enlarge our horizons. So definitely that is one big part. And again, if you apply this principle to any platform, there's always a way to create a debate and a real exchange with the community, pretty much in every platform that we have.
What has been discussed for, I don't know, probably longer than 10 years is how and if you should work with user-generated content, given the fact that you cannot just like take something in, take it for granted. It needs to be fact-checking, there are copyright issues and all these other stuff, let alone the fact that the question is, should you actually have that or rely on your own? What is your stance on using user-generated content? Is that a thing?
Not yet for us. One of my obsession is, when do I become a platform? When do I stop caring about curating every content and actually having people do the job for me? I don't see that happening in the near future. But having a 1.3 million followers on Instagram, for example, it's a lot of people and a lot of potential experts on some fields that can actually write to me and say, I'm an expert in this and you forgot about this topic or this side of the story or blah, blah, blah. And then I just can contact them, learn from them, and then it's not really user-generated content, but it's something that I took from them and put on in our editorial plan. So it's part of the debate, and maybe they can become creators in a sense. I see Will in a few years as a sort of an umbrella under which there are different creators, experts, however we want to call them, and most of them will come from the community. We will know them from the community, and then we'll become creators on their own, but Will be the curators.
But it will still be about news.
Yeah, whatever news can be defined for Will. Yeah.
I'm asking because we see these different developments. People or
what is news?
Well, it's a good question. What is news? Maybe we should use the term journalism more than news because that allows it to be way broader. But still, I think that has something to do with the motivation behind it and the question whether if you go off and just entertain, you can as well like start filming dog videos, yeah. And that is definitely very different from what I think you were successful for today. How do you decide which topic to choose? You're not like doing the breaking news. You don't have the constant ticker, so you are very selective, and obviously very successful in choosing these topics. How do you select these topics, and how do you decide which format you use? Because there is the whole full breadth of, you could use a meme, you could do a video, you could do whatever. How does that work? Is it a gut feeling? Is it the chief editor just knowing it, or what are you relying on?
He goes and he does whatever he likes. No, I think this is to me, for the very little understanding I can have of news, probably the answer I'm going to give is the kind of the most clear thing I can say about how far we are from news traditional, let's say. We plan our topics every 3 months, so quarterly. We decide that for the next quarter, we're going to focus on X, Y, and Z. The authors basically challenge each other to present the best campaign that they can and say, in 3 months, there's going to be the UN conference on blah, blah, blah. There's going to be the debate in Europe about this and blah, blah, blah. So we want our users to get ready for that moment. So in the next 3 months, we're going to focus on that. 1 to 3 campaigns per quarter, no more than that. And then every 2 weeks, we check those topics and see if our assumptions were right, if they still make sense. And then on a weekly basis, we create our editorial plan. 60–70% of the editorial plan is about those campaigns, and there are some hot topics, of course. And at this very stage, data come in, and we look at all the data that we have, and we decide which format or author should be doing that, or how we should post that. We let data help us, but not guide us 100%. They don't drive us. They don't drive the conversation, because I think that will hijack the way we want to work with our editorial plan. And then something that I'm really proud of, even though it's very tiring for the team, every day at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., the whole team regroups, and they try to destroy the plan that we have for the day after. And the answer is, why the heck should somebody care about this post? Why on earth should somebody share this video or post? And if all the posts and videos that we have planned survive, let's say, survive this cut, then they will be published. Otherwise, we just throw them in the bin, and we are more than happy to do so. Let me stress how, and you're a very informed audience, but imagine the ego war that can come, and say, I wrote that, I designed that, I crafted with the graphics. We solve that with the fact that we are a community with the audience, but also we are a community as a team, and we all accept that the first thing is to give the best to our community. So if my post doesn't survive the cut, so be it.
Okay. What I found interesting is that you have a website. Yep. You started it quite late in your journey, and a lot of things that, if you look at on a platform like Facebook, or if you use stories on Instagram, what we see with most partners still is it's a traffic game. It's a reach game, so driving traffic towards the website. It's something where we, from a user pattern, see that there's a clear decline from link posts, and it's being cannibalized by video consumption. It's very clearly what we see across the board, that there is a decline in the interest in clicking something, reading something, and the consumption goes over to video, which I find partly concerning, because the video content that is available is very often not as in-depth as a story that you would write following a link. But what role does the website play in your overall strategy?
Very little, to be honest. We didn't have a website up until very recently. We used to have like a landing page with just the team, and to give the transparency that we needed in terms of who was doing Will on a daily basis. But now we with our website, we do basically what we couldn't hack on your platforms. So we give people a chance to look and search through our contents, and maybe they forgot, they knew that they know that they saw that content, but can't remember where was it or what actually was that about. So they can search for the main topic and then look into the specific, and then they will see all the posts or podcasts or videos that we published across all platforms, and then they can read them or watch them. That's the only thing that the website does.
Okay. What's your looking back before we look a little bit ahead in the future and then close it off? And I know that we're actually not supposed to do Q&A, but I feel there might be some questions in the room, so maybe we can find a way without a mic. But what is your favorite story looking back across the last year that you felt was either most important to you or most impactful?
This is a tough one. I would say two, if I can. Actually, two answers to that. One is the tour that we did. I'm really proud of that, even though it's not a story per se, but a way to engage the community. And the main objective of the tour was not to have debates like this with a desk and people listening to, but we were just opening a conversation saying, which is the most difficult topic to discuss with your parents or grandparents at Sunday at lunch. And that helped us in creating a more inclusive editorial plan. And that guided us through the whole year. And I would say the second part is every meme that we actually did. One of the best meme that we used was, one of those TV shows where people are supposed to face a series of crazy obstacles to go from point A to point B. Basically, was this guy dressed up in a full American football uniform, and he was supposed to break a set of glasses, right? Fences made of glass. And we used that video to make a meme about a young, newly graduated Italian boy or girl, and all the difficulties they had to face to enter the job market. And they were very specific. From the resume, people not answering to you, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a long caption. And that with a funny video, a stupid one in a sense, we were able to place an important fact, which is probably the most engaging topic that we have, which is the sum of young people, job, and competencies. So either I studied for something, I can find a job related to that, or I have a job, I have no idea how to do it. Through a meme with no, without being ashamed of using a meme, we addressed something that people loved, and our community said, that's exactly me. And I think when something is so relatable, it's a great story to me.
What I need to call out is you are relying on platforms to be out there, be present, to build up your brand. And since it's out there on the internet somewhere, I famously said that if you're building your business just on other platforms, you're not running a business, you're running a bet. Because you have no control over what these platforms do next.
You sound like my investors.
What do you do about this? Is that just a risk you're headed? You have no clue what any of the platforms will do next. You might have a relationship and information flowing, but in essence, you don't have any say in it. How do you tackle that? Is it all or nothing?
Somehow, maybe, but yes, there's a big risk. What we try to do is I think anyone who says predict are lying in a sense, so I don't want to say predict. We try to match whatever comes, and we try to understand what's going on the platform when we see our posts not going as well as we expected them or so. I think that if you have enough knowledge and data, then you can look and say, okay, things are not going as planned, so let's see what we can try, and then we try and test every single element of that. So data is, in a way, something that we can try to use to limit that, but there's always going to be that dependency. It's my number one concern, as I mentioned before. So definitely, your role as platform is something key, and I guess people came to listen also to that. I like to think that the way we create content, the kind of content we create, and the kind of engagement that we create is something valuable for all platforms that we work with. And I don't see why our content should be penalized in a sense, let's say, or should lose traction, all of that. So I see paths going in the same direction potentially. I have to be optimistic, but yeah, that's my view. Like,
I guess it would be very interesting as a follow-up to get you together with others. There was another panel today, I guess several, where independence of media was discussed and how important independence is and how big the risk is to be dependent on platforms, be it through financing or just using the services and relying on the distribution. So I think that is an interesting discussion to follow up on. What's next? What is your, obviously Meta, you know this, everyone has heard about us building for the metaverse in the next 10 years. The question we hear very often is so what is news in the metaverse? What does that look like? And the answer is we don't know. We are not going to build a box to be filled with journalistic content that then lives on a predefined way in the metaverse, because we think the metaverse is the next version of the internet. And it's nothing that we are building as a company, although our name is close to it, but we will contribute to it. What is your view on this? Is that actually something you are thinking about, AR, VR, the next way of how to interact with people? Does that have space in your day-to-day?
It doesn't, to be honest, not yet. The other day I was building the IKEA furniture of the office. So I have so many different priorities as we are a small team. I'm very happy to be here on stage with Meta, but we are a small, very small startup, and so the fact that we may have not the time to think about these kind of things, or we may lose the train for this kind of innovation. I think it's something that really is on our mind on a daily basis. Content is our number one priority, but maybe it's not enough, and that is a big, something that scares a lot.
I don't think you should be nervous. I don't think that anyone has a clue what journalism in the metaverse or whatever we might call it in the future will look like as of today. I think it's a long journey to get there, and we'll have time enough to understand what it actually does when it's there and when we see the usage of it. Before we close out, I would just what would you wish for Will Media?
Let's say the objective that we set ourselves when we started is to help close the gap between generations. I'd like that people start considering this kind of sources to spread information and knowledge awareness, not just as something for young kids to young kids, but it's just a way to close the gap between generations. Gen Z and millennials are, as you said before, I really love that, are as much interested into politics or social issues as the previous generations. They just care about different things. And the sooner the older generations understand that, the sooner they can close that gap on social issues, at political level, but also business-wise, and talk to potential readers and users of the kind of information. So I'd like to close that gap.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandro, for sharing this with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. The only thing is we don't have a mic, so you might have to stand up and ask it with a loud voice, and we'll repeat the question for the room as far as we understand it. Are there any questions? Everything crystal clear. So that means we were either really, really thoughtful and detailed, or it was incredibly boring. Yes.
Journalism and media. And I was wondering, since it is so different from the things that I believe most people here do, is this something that you believe that Meta in the future is going to be more interested in terms of developing news partnerships?
That's a great question. Has everyone understood the question? Yes? Yeah, nodding? Great. Okay, so the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is since what Alessandro has just shared is very, very different from what a lot in the room, including myself, having worked in the media industry for 20 years before I joined Meta, would see as journalism, as journalistic work, is the described example and an indication of what we would look for more in the future compared to journalistic work. The answer to that is, I don't know. The reason why we brought Alessandro is to actually exactly share that. I was inspired because it was so different from what I've learned, from what I've experienced. I feel it is inspiring, it's a little bit scary. I have some concerns about this, whether this is the right way, whether it's going to be successful, whether it's enough. And the reason we brought Alessandro on stage is because I think it's really important to understand that this is happening and this is successful. So what can we learn from that? And what we do currently, and which we constantly do, is we're trying to find a way to look 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. Like, where's the industry headed? What do we know from users? What do our products and platforms do? Which role do they play? We are doing more. Like, we're not just continuing what we've done over the past 5 or 10 years, probably rather 5, in working with the industry. We're trying to think ahead, but the answer is, to your concrete question, is that what we concentrate on? No. Will it play a role in what we have in the future? Probably yes.
Yeah, I mean, you said let's think about the future, so thinking ahead, and it's absolutely what we need. But while we think ahead, can we just understand, okay, this thing is working, people like it, but at the same time put in the balance which are the risks, how we deal with risk. I mean, things like Cambridge Analytica. Okay, I mean, democracy, that's something that it's really important for us. You know, we do public information, so we are journalists, and we want, I'm not giving you a perspective of regulation because you said we don't talk about regulation. So I'm thinking about democracy. So how you can see the dimension of balancing something that works and risks.
I'll try to answer that. I'm not 100% sure whether I understood your point fully. I don't think that there's a balancing between what Alessandro does and Jamaica Risk, because I think it contributes to an informed society in a way that lands with the audience. I don't think we can just say, well, this is a new way and it's very different, and because it's different, it's dangerous and doesn't do what it was done in the past. When it comes to the question of the importance of journalism, independent journalism, strong journalism, I can definitely speak for my team. Everyone on my team is from former media and former journalists. We care a lot about this and want to make sure that strong and good journalism can persist on our services as they are. We've worked through several ways of doing that. None of them are successful. Some are very successful. And it is a balance that we have. It's a daily challenge, and there will always be risks associated to it. We have a war in Europe going on where you can every day see the battle between the facts and the misinformation and the strategy and the campaigning, which is the nature of a war, because truth is the first thing that dies in a war. So we see this in our daily lives. Our teams are involved in trying to balance that out and ensure that the right information gets out there to the people, which is a very hard job. So we take this very serious, but I'm not saying that they're unrisk. But I just want to make sure that I don't feel it's a fair relation to what Alessandro does to position that as something that should be balanced out as a risk. That's my personal opinion. Oh, sorry.
I have a question for Alessandro. I'm Juanita Leon, founder of La Silla Vacía Media in Colombia. I'm just curious about the way you manage your newsroom with this idea of a remote planning. What happens if, if you work with experts, but the topics that you find are not the expertise of the group? I mean, do you change journalists, or how do you go about that?
I expect people not to raise topics that they don't know about. And our number one core value is that if you can't put it simply, that means you don't know it enough. So probably they wouldn't survive the cut in saying, we should pick your campaign instead of the other campaign. So experts in our team suggest that they'll bring one topic for the next 3 months, and if we all think it's going to work, then we follow with that. So we expect people to know that. Yeah, so I don't know if I answer your question.
The rest of the team, I mean, if you choose one campaign, what do the other people in the team do?
We choose 2-3 campaigns, and we just follow that, and then it's not 100% of the editorial plan for those campaigns. As I said, it's 60-70%, and then there's the rest, which is 30% other topics which are relevant for the other experts in the team.
My name is Jurgen. I'm a reporter from the Netherlands, a media reporter. And I'd like to ask a question to Alessandro. When Jesper asked you whether you see the legacy media as competitors, you sort of, well, not very much. But they may see you as a great opportunity maybe and think, well, this is growing fast, let's buy it. Do you think that is a risk or an opportunity or a possibility in the near future? I mean, as a big media company, I think that would be interesting because if you say they're struggling with social media, you guys know how to do that. Are we going to see that in the next years or so?
I think that requires some vision from a big organization. To buy the newcomer, it may look fancy, let's say, or common sense, good sense, but it's not that easy to happen. I think it's going to happen one day, and I think it could do well for the organization. I don't know. We'll see. Who knows? Let's say. I think it's a very complicated market. When you're
Knock at the door yet?
come again?
They didn't knock at your door yet?
A lot of people are looking at what Will does. Let's say.
Yeah.
Just a very, very quick one. Nobody else has it. So, for Jesper again, are you worried that Alessandro said that one of the main ways that they are able to grow their audience is basically trying to find hacks in your platform? What does that tell you about the platform itself if they feel the need to find hacks in order to grow?
I hope that we're not talking about technical hacks in that
Creative
sense.
ones.
But if it's a creative hack, I'm not concerned because what it does, it actually educates us back that, hey, you can do this with us. I don't think that anyone has, I have never heard about this story about telling a novel through using a carousel on the video thing. That's a creative way of using the tools. And if that is the way of hacking to find ways of doing it, we might actually learn from it and make it a feature if it works. So no, I'm not concerned. I would be concerned if it would be a technical hack or something. The general advice is don't try to game the system, because if you do that, you might have like your sugar rush for a short moment, but in the end, it's going to go and punish your reach or your followership. So that's not great advice. So don't like fall for the short-term opportunities that you think they're in that. But other than that, creative hacking is always welcome. Any more questions? Been shown that we don't have more time, so if you have, we will stick around outside. Please find us. Thank you for coming. Hope it was useful.
Thank you.